Tonight, I will be showing through research and evidence the direct correlation between reading for pleasure and student achievement and higher test scores, and how we as educators can make a difference in providing opportunities to foster pleasure reading habits among our students, as it will significantly impact their achievement and success and their futures. My name is Hannah Knecht. I am the program director for Hands Across the Sea, a nonprofit organization that for the last 12 years has established and sustained hundreds of school libraries throughout the Caribbean, including Grenada. I have a master's degree in education and curriculum development and have 10 years experience teaching grade 4 and grade 6 in primary school and Form 1 in secondary school in the United States. So I'd like to begin by taking a poll. How many of you read for pleasure? What made you that way? Did your love of reading come from when you were a child back in school or at home? Did your love of reading emerge as a teen or an adult? Think back to when you first started to like reading. What made that happen for you? For me, my love of reading began when I was able to complete my first chapter book on my own, from start to finish, all the way through. I had chosen this book for myself because of the pictures on the front cover, and the few words on the first pages had appealed to me about a girl who was also 9 years old. But life and school assignments, pressure from teachers, distractions from classmates, kept me from pleasure reading for much of my primary and secondary school education, and even into my university years. It wasn't until adulthood that I had the freedom to choose the books I wanted to read and find that love of reading again. But I had to make the time to read, and that was the challenge, and it had been all along. One way I did that was by listening to audiobooks on my commute to and from work every day. That habit evolved into reading books that I could not get the audio versions of, and I read books from my school library during those free moments of my day and my commute. How many of you don't read? Be honest. Are you in the middle of a book right now? For many of us, we do not read as adults for pleasure because we simply do not have the time. We choose to fill our lives with other activities and do not value the importance of reading for ourselves. But what is that modeling for our children at home? What is that modeling for our students? Why do we not read? For some of us, though, perhaps we don't like it. Maybe we are too ashamed to admit it. Have you ever liked reading? What experiences made you this way? Perhaps you are like my husband. He had very little access to books at home. In primary school, he was never given the opportunity to really read what he wanted to read. His teachers required him to read the passages in his reading textbooks and books that she selected for the class. Often these books were too hard for him, unrelatable, or just boring to a young kid his age. And when he was given the chance to choose a book about astronauts or dinosaurs or superheroes, his teachers required a 3-page book report on it once he had finished. This killed any love of reading he ever had. And so he grew up reading what he had to in order to get by, but he was never a strong reader and frankly never enjoyed it. He lacked motivation to read outside of school, and so he did not. How many of you can relate to his story? How many of your students could relate to this story too? There's a literacy problem in our world today. Literacy scores remain low in both primary and secondary schools. This is true of the Caribbean. We know this is true. We have seen the test scores. Many students do not read for pleasure at home or at school. Many students do not have a positive attitude toward reading. Many educators do not read for pleasure. Many educators feel like they do not have time for their students to read in the classroom. What if I told you that we could do something about that? Research shows that pleasure reading habits are the answer. So let's define pleasure reading. Reading for pleasure is reading because you want to. No book reports, no questions at the end of the chapter. You get to choose the book you want to read. You don't have to finish the book if you don't like it. It's also called free independent reading, FIR, or free voluntary reading, FVR, or sometimes sustained silent reading, SSR, by researchers. So why pleasure? Students learn more and are more motivated when they are enjoying the activity. We know this. There is strong evidence that free voluntary reading is very enjoyable. Flow is the state people reach when they are deeply but effortlessly involved in an activity, and reading is the most frequently mentioned flow activity. Students' motivation and interest in reading is higher when they get the opportunity to read in school. No other classroom activity that teaches reading has shown better results as reading for pleasure, not only in terms of reading achievement, but also in terms of motivation. Benefits of reading for pleasure. You will note that each of these is backed by studies, research, and solid evidence, proving that each one indeed is a benefit of reading. It builds knowledge, improves achievement, increases motivation, increases vocabulary, improves writing, builds background knowledge, improves understanding of text structures, develops empathy, and develops personal identity. We learn to read by reading. Research shows that reading is the only way we become good readers. We learn to read by attempting to make sense of what we see on the page. The students who read the most are the best at every part of school. Reading, writing, researching, content-specific knowledge, all of it. They are the best test takers too. Reading comprehension scores improve when students read for pleasure. After 1 year of reading for pleasure as a daily classroom activity, students increased their reading comprehension scores by 12.8 points, while comparisons only improved 4.6 points. Pleasure reading is the most consistent and strongest predictor of reading comprehension performance. This has been documented in study after study, published as professional scientific papers in journals and in books. Correlations between free voluntary reading and scores on literacy proficiency tests show that free voluntary reading makes a difference. Background knowledge increases. Pleasure reading provides increased background knowledge necessary for student achievement in the sciences, mathematics, and history. A study by the Institute for Education found that pleasure reading had a 14.4% advantage in vocabulary and a 9.9% advantage in math. Vocabulary, grammar, writing style, and spelling. When children read for pleasure, when they get hooked on books, they acquire involuntarily and without conscious effort nearly all of the so-called language skills many people are so concerned about. They will become adequate readers, acquire a large vocabulary, develop the ability to understand and use complex grammatical constructions, develop a good writing style, and become good spellers. Critical thinking. Reading builds a cognitive processing infrastructure that then massively influences every aspect of our thinking, particularly our crystallized intelligence, a person's depth and breadth of general knowledge, vocabulary, and the ability to reason using words and numbers. Studies show that students who read for pleasure are more creative and are able to stay with a problem for longer. Develops empathy. This is a value to be acquired. The 2007 National Endowment for the Arts report found that pleasure reading not only boosts the likelihood of an individual's academic and economic success, but it also awakens a person's social and civic sense, a better understanding of other cultures, community participation, and a greater insight into human nature and decision-making. Free independent reading is the most valuable classroom activity during the language block. Osborne described a sustained silent reading program in a 9th grade reading class of 60, most of whom were at-risk students. Students gained an average of 3.9 year levels on their reading achievement test scores during a 1-year program. Higher test scores and academic success. One study done at a low-achieving primary school implemented 30 minutes of pleasure reading a day for all students in every grade level. The report showed that the average student read 20 books and had a reading growth of 2.4 years. The school's total average increased by 8.5 points. Higher test scores and overall academic success. Research indicates that time spent reading correlates positively with students' performance on standardized reading tests. You see the chart here with 3 columns: minutes of reading per day, number of words read per year, and the percentile rank on reading tests. You see that students who read 91 minutes a day scored on the 98th percentile on reading tests. Students who read for 40 minutes a day scored in the 90th percentile on reading tests. Students who read for 22 minutes a day, 70th percentile. 13 minutes a day, 50th. 3 minutes a day, 20th to 10th. Readers experience success after school too. The CXC tests, like the SAT in the United States, are 80% critical reading. And the best long-term preparation for these tests is reading. Reading every day, reading for pleasure, reading a variety of text, reading that challenges students will enable them to do well on end-of-year tests, college and university entrance exams, and success in the workplace. And isn't that what we all want? Readers experience success in the workplace. Pleasure readers not only experience greater success academically than their reading counterparts, pleasure readers experience greater success in the workplace. Reading is certainly necessary to doing school, to the navigation of modern life, to functioning as an informed, democratic citizen, to working in a knowledge economy. Literacy is essential not only to accessing information and staying current, it is also essential to doing work in the world. Our goal is to develop lifelong readers, and we can only achieve that through efficacy. The question is, how do we motivate our students to want to read for themselves? The answer is clear. Give them a chance to actually read in the classroom and get into a home run book that they will want to take home and find out what happens next. Reading is more than a number. It is a civic responsibility, one that should live in and outside the classroom. We make time for the things we value. No matter what our curriculum requires us to teach or how little class time we have, children must read a lot in order to attain even minimum levels of reading achievement. It requires a daily commitment on all our parts. By ensuring our students read every day at school, provides them opportunities to fall in love with books and develop stamina for reading. Requiring daily pleasure reading in school builds students' capacity for reading outside of school, which is what we want our students to do. And the exciting news is the books are there. Most schools in Grenada have books, and this is because of Hands Across the Sea. For the last 12 years, Hands Across the Sea has set up and supports school libraries in Antigua, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Hands Across the Sea has sent 464,162 new asked for amazing books that students want to read. Hands Across the Sea has set up a support system for schools with on-island literacy links, people that monitor and collaborate with principals and teaching staff to keep libraries open and accessible to students. Here in Grenada, we have retired education officers Gloria Bonaparte and Bernadette John working as these on-island literacy links. Hands Across the Sea also mentors and coaches teachers in collaboration with the ELP program, Early Learners Program, and the Ministry of Education through a publication we developed called The Teacher's Resource Guide to the Library, and through teacher workshops, both specifically designed to help teachers utilize the books that are in their school libraries and in their lesson plans and classroom activities. Want your own copy? The Teacher's Resource Guide is meant to be used, not kept on a shelf in the library. So if you want your own copy, it's available for download from handsacrossthesea.net. How can we as educators develop pleasure reading habits among our students? Allow more time for students to read for pleasure. Many schools have implemented school-wide DEAR time for 15 minutes a day. DEAR stands for Drop Everything and Read. And while this is good, we saw from the chart earlier how beneficial it was to provide even more time for students to be reading every day. So extending dear time to 30 minutes if possible is an excellent structure that will facilitate pleasure reading habits among students. Requiring teachers to take students to the library weekly is a must. Teachers, bring books from the library to your classroom for your students to browse and choose from. Require students to check in and check out books weekly. Take books home and bring them back to school every day to read. Model pleasure reading yourself as the teacher by bringing a book to school and reading it during dear time too. Could you have a Teachers as Readers book club once a week or once a month during your lunch break with other fellow teachers at your school? So what does a reading workshop look like? 1, time. Students need substantial time to read and look through books. 2, choice. Students need the opportunity to choose reading materials for themselves. 3, response. Students should respond in natural ways to books they are reading through conferences, written entries, classroom discussions, and projects. 4, community. Students are part of a classroom reading community in which all members can make meaningful contributions to the learning of the group. 5, structure. The workshop rests on a structure or routines and procedures that support students and teachers. How to structure a language block. Yes, we have to teach our curriculum content, but does that have to take up the entire class time? Could we consolidate this direct instruction into a mini lesson for our students, teaching, modeling, and practicing in a short, concise lesson that only takes 25% or less of the language block? I think we can. Then we protect 50% or more of the language block time for our students to actually read. So what does that look like? Students are reading their choice of book and responding to the prompt of their choice in a reader's notebook. The teacher checks in with a few students a day individually about what they are reading and through the reader's notebook. And then finally, reading clubs facilitate opportunities for students to discuss in small groups, 3 to 5 students, what they are reading and have the opportunity to share their written reactions in a reader's notebook. Here are a few reflection and reaction statements that you can have students choose from to write about in the reader's notebook. So you still have an accountability measure for what students are reading without the dreaded book report for every single book they read. How to motivate reluctant readers. We all have those students who have gotten in the habits of not reading and not enjoying reading. So how do we inspire those students? Well, how about read a chapter book aloud to your students and stop halfway through? I have a good feeling that many students will get curious and eager to find out what happens next. Share book recommendations. Teachers, principals, read books from your school libraries that may interest your students. Know what exists in your libraries. Know what books are there. And make recommendations to students based on the ones that you have liked. I learned of an amazing, devoted teacher here in Grenada who took it upon herself to read the book Diary of a Wimpy Kid because she wanted to connect with her students, particularly one student who was a reluctant reader. She actually is writing letters back and forth with the student, sharing her opinions about the book and mailing it to her home address to make this student feel valued. Find out what topics interest your students to assist in finding books that they may want to read. So how can we motivate our students to read for pleasure? Allow students to choose graphic novels and comics. Allow students to abandon a book and choose another if it does not appeal to them. Withhold the book report requirement and implement a reader's notebook or other method of accountability. Provide places around your classroom and school for students to read. Provide opportunities for students to talk about books. Research shows that it is important for students to share about what they are reading with others to solidify themselves as readers and to remember what they read. Provide opportunities to share with partners or reading club groups and with the class. How can we make more time for reading? How can we not? Teachers need to be assured that creating such an environment will make your job easier, not harder, and will give more satisfying results. Here are a few practical ideas to increase students' time to pleasure read in school. Students can pull out a book during classroom interruptions. We all We're all interrupted for some reason or another. Could you train your students to pull out a book and read quietly at their desks whenever the class is interrupted? Bell ringers and warm-ups while students are waiting for the teacher to arrive and for the lesson to begin. When students are done with assignments, what about during the in-between times, like on sports days, awards days, assemblies? Could we have our students bring their book with them and read while they're waiting? We are always complaining about how to keep our students quiet while they're waiting. This may be your answer. Students can read during library time too, after they have checked out a book and are waiting for other students. Pleasure reading is not something extra. It reinforces the reading strategies and curriculum content that you are already teaching. We have confused cause and effect. We have assumed that we first master language skills and then apply those skills to reading and writing. Rather, reading for meaning, reading about things that matter to us, is the cause of literate language development. How can principals and education officers support, implement, and enforce school-wide DEAR time or extend it? Implement, encourage, and monitor that all teachers take their students to the school library once a week. Support teachers in protecting pleasure reading time within their language blocks. Support teachers in lesson planning to integrate curriculum standards into mini lessons to condense direct instruction, freeing up more time to practice those reading strategies through pleasure reading. Share the library with parents and the community through volunteer opportunities, events, school Facebook page, etc. And encourage teachers as readers book clubs. Teachers, you are valuable. Teaching is hard work and often an uphill battle, but the career path you have chosen will make a difference in our students' lives and impact their futures. Don't give up. Celebrate the little victories and know that what you're doing matters.